Let's begin. Our first person we'd like to introduce, Claudia Lebenthal. She's the founder of Style of Sport, the digital publication that celebrates sports and intersection with fashion, design, arts, news, and culture. She's also the co-author of the award-winning coffee table book, Stoked, The Evolution of Action Sports. And she's also a visual director of a lot of Condé Nast publications, including Allure, Women's Sports, Fitness, and Self. Please welcome Claudia. All right, I'm going to come on this side to introduce the next gentleman. He has written for Surfing Magazine for over 13 years. But somehow, he has dropped off the face of the earth since then. We don't know what the hell he's been doing. Of course, he's creator of Millennium and my all-time favorite television program, The X-Files. Chris is, if I can add, a generation of people who know surf and skate, like Spike Jones and Chris, are the best filmmakers, and he is the proof of that. So the truth is out there. This guy, he's a 30-year-old shirt that still fits. He's world champion, I don't know how many times over. He's an author. He's one time Surfer the Stage, a wonderful book with Noah Ben-Shea. He's done television, movies, but you probably didn't know that 17 years ago he had one role that none of you knew. He was a diplomat. Yes. And it happened at the opening of his film Busting Down the Door when I was his poor green production manager of the film festival. And somehow we oversold the Arlington Theater by about 500 seats. So I'm trying to hold the door back, and these guys are saying, "You effing suck." You said, I never gathered so much hate. Out pops this gentleman, and he just says, we'll just have another screening, and I'll bring everyone back. Sure enough, they walked away satisfied. This guy saved my life. Well done. Shaun, Tomson. Take it away.
Quite an intro for everybody here. Well, welcome everybody. Surfer Stories, 12 stories by 12 writers about 12 of the world's greatest surfers. One of them happens to be sitting here tonight. But 12 pioneers, legends, who made their mark on surf history, distinguished by their fearlessness and artistry, both in and out of the water. Though my name is on the cover, as I said, I did not write the stories. I got 12 people to write the stories, one of them being here right now, Chris Carter, and they're all completely different. I'm often asked, how did you choose the writers? How did you choose the surfers? I didn't. The writers chose the surfers. And every writer I went to said, I have a story I want to tell about this surfer, I want to tell about that surfer, and the pairings were beautiful. So that's what we have here tonight. We've got Chris Carter, who said, I want to write about Shaun Tomson. And I'll give a little background. So yes, Chris is the creator of the X-Files. Little did I know until his star, David Duchovny, said, I had reached out to David and said, do you want to write a story? And he's like, no, I don't surf, but I pinged my buddy Chris Carter. I actually did.
Said out heaven.
So I look up Chris Carter. I was like, oh, creator of the X-Files. Fine, okay, great. Then I go, Chris Carter, X-Files surfing. Chris Carter began his career at Surfing Magazine. So he had profiled Shaun in the 80s and said, I want to write about him again 40 plus years later. I'm giving a little intros on you both, and then I'm gonna ask you both some questions. And then over here, we've got Shaun Tomson, who, yes, is the subject of Chris's story, but Chris also himself profiled a surfer. And you were actually the first writer that I came to. And I said, who do you want to write about? And he said, I want to write about Kelly Slater. I want first dibs.
Yeah.
Okay, done. I mean, to me, that was like Jack Nicklaus wanting to profile Tiger Woods. It's like, okay, great. So, but Shaun is also our cover boy. If you've wondered who this kid is on the cover, it's this one over here. And you sent me this picture, and and in thinking about what should the cover be, I didn't want an action shot. They're book of stories. I wanted people to read them. I wanted it to feel like something you could put on your coffee table, but on your bedside table. And what I love about this picture is it could be, yes, if you look and you see those ears, it's Shaun, but it could also just be any little surf mom just stoked on surfing. So I want to ask. I'm going to start with you, Chris. You as I say, you were started at Surfing Magazine. You covered Shaun then. I want to talk about who this guy was then, what you were covering, and sort of what made you want to profile him again.
Shaun, when I went to work at Surfing Magazine, Shaun, it was right around 1979. Shaun had just won a world championship. He could not have been a more charismatic. He's part of the soul of surfing in a big way, and that I would get the chance to in the early '80s not only profile him, but he invited me to stay at his hotel room on the North Shore. I had been living in a tent on the North Shore. Shaun invited me to
the condo.
The condo at Kuilima, Turtle Bay. Yeah, right. Anyway, it was a dream come true, and
And there you go. So, but talk to tell us a little bit. So I keep saying, I've been writing. You pioneered this modern surf style. You and your Aussie mates hit the North Shore and sort of tore it up. Tell us a little bit about that era. I'll ask you, and then I'll ask you about sort of covering it. What was that surf style, that modern day surf style? What made you different in your style, different from what was going on before?
I think myself and my contemporaries, we came from a post-colonial culture where sport was everything. We played rugby, cricket, tennis, swimming. And for us, surfing was not quite the same. And, what we try to do, I think we try to instill a bit of sport into the lifestyle. Whether that was good or bad, it was just really different. And we thought that maybe there was going to be a future in this. I mean, we had this amazing love for surfing. I think I used to surf 8 hours a day. I would go in the morning, come out in the late afternoon. I mean, we just had this incredible passion for it. And I think we wanted to create something out of it that could sustain us. And I think as a sport, we looked at like Formula One, we looked at the tennis tour, and we thought, man, we better. We're risking our lives. We're pretty good looking. We got the short little shorts on, all of us.
I love that.
They were all handsome dudes. Girls were really, the surf girls were really good looking. And we just thought that we could create something out of it. And I think our attitude, whereas maybe the Hawaiians had looked at surfing more as a lifestyle, it was more sort of peace, love, and brotherhood. They'd come out of the late 60s. End of the Vietnam War, Hare Krishna. The North Shore was sort of this, the last sort of vestige of Woodstock. It was like Woodstock. The North Shore, the 7 miles there. I mean, there was still
Woodstock with the Hui.
Yeah, they were Woodstock with a few gangsters. Our style was radical. Our approach was radical. Our boards were different. Our attitude was different, and it was just like a shake-up of surfing at the time. At the time, I suppose it was a revolution in our little tiny surfing world.
So you just caused now, and some of that you as you reference, and I'm fascinated about that era. And you actually pulled a quote because there was a darker period over there, so that the Hawaiians being so mellow, and you kind of infuriated. I'm just going to read this little bit because I love it so much. Hawaiian surfers objected to these white boys from South Africa and Oz hogging not only their waves, but all the attention from the media. They were making bold statements. They were busting down the door. Shaun had made too many magazine covers, won the Hawaiian contest, stuck with his mates. He was articulate and pretty. The North Shore is a lawless place run by violent overlords. There was a rumor that surfer Tommy Castellan had been held on the floor all night with a gun to his head. That Fast Eddie Rothman was behind it. No one wanted to piss off Fast Eddie, of course. His Hawaiian kappas had gone to high school where they had Kill Howley Day. Howleys being the white kids. Shaun and the other stars fit the picture. The insular Australian surfer Ian Cairns blurted out to me in the editorial suite at Surfing Magazine in 1980, right outside the office, where Fast Eddie had walked in and in effect threatened editor Dave Gilovich's life. If he were to write the wrong thing or the wrong photos, it was war. Some got it worse than ever. Shaun got false cracked or hit unexpectedly in the face by Eddie. So there was quite a lot of, it was not so pretty. And there's actually one story that I'm sad is not in this book, which is Eddie Akau, who really did play peacemaker, I think.
Yes.
But tell us a little bit about that. Who's going to talk? You want to share?
He lived it.
Yeah, so
You wrote it so incredibly well. It's like a screenplay.
there was drama, definitely, during this sort of formative time of pro surfing. In fact, there were 2 years when there was a lot of heat on us foreign guys. One year was 1976 when Rabbit Bartholomew wrote an article for Surfing Magazine called Busting Down the Door, which inflamed a lot of people on the North Shore, and they felt it was a really disrespectful article. But if you read that article, I read it a couple of years ago, the article is incredibly respectful and talks about how much reverence us guys had for the Hawaiian surfers and the Hawaiian style, but our style was different, and we were looking to do something new. But like what was it when all those professors, the presidents of Harvard, Yale, Columbia, context, they kept talking about context. And in the context of the article was pretty innocuous, but in the context of that time, it was inflammatory. So there was a lot of guys getting bashed by this group of tough guys who saw themselves as the protectors of the North Shore, the Hui. So a lot of guys got bashed. PT got bashed. Ian Cairns got bashed. Rabbit Bartholomew got bashed. And then 2 years later, an article was written about me in Penthouse magazine, of all magazines. And the journalist, when he wrote the article, you know him, Harry Minitrin, passed away. He's a Hamptons guy. Harry wrote the article, and he phoned me up, and he said, "Hey, Shaun," and he came to Hawaii to interview me. He said, "Shaun, I want to interview Fast Eddie Rothman." And I phoned up Eddie, and I said, "Hey, Eddie, this journalist wants to interview you." He said, "Tell him no, I don't want to be interviewed." And then the article came out, and there was a perception that I had written the article. So that was the story. And then I had a lot of beef, got punched out, false cracked a number of times. Eventually I had to go and buy a 12 gauge because I've been threatened with death so many times. I'm 22 years old, I've got a pump action 12 gauge I'm carrying around with me.
What's that?
Pump action 12 gauge Remington shotgun. And it's a very...
That's how serious the mafiosi were.
It was a very serious time. Eddie Akau had died by this time. Eddie Akau died in 1978. He played peacemaker for the Australian situation, but he passed away. So I had to have a big meeting with all the guys, the representatives from the gang, and then all the pro surfers on the island came to support me. And a lot of Hawaiian surfers, very famous surfers at the time, Barry Kanai, Larry Burton, all these surfers, came to support me and said, hey, Shaun's a good guy, he didn't write the article, just, so peace was declared. But all of us had to go through that trial by fire, every single one of us, except Mark Richards. Mark was, Mike, where's he? He said, I'm a diplomat. Mark Richards is like the uber diplomat. he never copied. But that's just part of what it is, part of our story. It was a tough time, but none of us left the island. We all stayed. And we just toughed our way through it. Got a couple of cracks.
Toughened you up. Well,
my 12 days and
there you go. Well, I just want to sort of fast forward now because, as I said, writers chose the surfers, and I'd come to you, and you said you wanted to write about Shaun, and
it was perfect. You showed me this list of surfers, and it's like there was no question I had to write about Shaun. Also, Shaun and I live in the same city, so it was really easy. I just rolled down the street, and he spoke at the community college here, and so I had to roll down the street to go to that talk, and then the Bill Delaney movie, Free Ride, had been remastered and was showing at the Libero Theater, so I just rolled to the Libero Theater. So it was really one of the easiest assignments I'd ever gotten.
And but 40 plus, you think of like how much happens in a lifetime in 40 years. And when you said you wanted to do it, I found that such a powerful concept. You think of what any of us have lived through in 40 years, and to go back, what was that experience like?
Well, it was nice to be sitting across the table. We had lunch together twice, and right around the time Shaun did a wonderful movie called Busting Down the Door, and we'd sort of gotten together then briefly, but so much, we had lived so much a life in the 40 years. It was I don't know, it was there was something for me heartfelt in my in my approach to the story I wrote about Shaun.
I think it was very warm.
It's a wonderful story. And so, but then you decide, all right, I'm done with surfing. I'm going to Hollywood. Tell us a little bit about.
Oh yeah,
that story. How'd that move happen?
So how'd that move happen? I was in Surfing Magazine. I met a woman who would become my wife, who was a Hollywood screenwriter, and so she said to me, "You ever thought about writing a script?" And I said, "Sure, I've got a perfect story." So I wrote the story. I got meetings around town in Hollywood. I wrote a second script. I got a 3-picture deal at Disney. It's like one day I was a surfer, the next day I was a Hollywood screenwriter. So it happened very fast for me. Then I spent about 7 years paying my dues, and I got hired to create TV shows by 20th Century Fox. A guy named Peter Roth there believed in me, and that's where I created The X-Files, and that was over 30 years ago. Wow. So it was... It happened fast, then it happened slow, then it happened fast.
Well, there's a funny story that I write in my intro that Jim Kempton, who's one of the other writers in the book, he profiled Joe Lopez actually, and he's told me a story. He said, I was at Surfer Magazine that you guys were friends when Chris was at surfing, and he told me about. He's like, I don't know, man. I tried to talk to him. He's like, you got the best job in the world. I don't think that's such a good idea. It's like, as I write, it's like, good thing Chris didn't listen.
Oh, there were all kinds. There were more than Jim that tried to talk me out of it, out of jealousy, ultimately.
Oh, there you go. Well, I want to shift over to you for a second and talk about you as a writer. You had said you want to write about Kelly. As I say, it's the great of one generation sharing their insights on the great of another. So I knew why, for me, like, wow. But why did you want to write about Kelly? And I should also say it's the grand finale in the book. It's the last story. It felt like that's the grand finale there. So, what made you want to write about Kelly? Why did you?
In the context of surfing, he's a genius. Absolutely. Context on that. He's an absolute genius. I think the way he approaches waves, the way he sees waves, he actually perceives them differently to how we perceive them. I mean, I've seen him surf so many times. I first met him when he was just a young boy, 15 years old, and I could see it right then. He just had this sort of aura about him. You know, it just gives me chills when I think of it.
You read a wonderful job. You can read, or let you read it. Your intro there. You want to read it? Or you want me to?
Sure.
I'll let you read it.
I can do that.
You did a great job.
It lends itself to that. I think this is the one. Yeah, that's. Well, yes, at the wetsuit. Yeah.
In 1989, when I first saw him surf, Kelly was a compact and slender, nut brown, Cocoa Beach, Florida kid. Brown hair flecked with blonde streaks, with a fluoro orange Matt Keckley board, a color coordinated fluoro green O'Neill wetsuit, and an aura of absolute confidence. His style was fluid and fast, and unlike any young surfer I had ever seen. Quick yet calm, powerful yet loose, fully realized and fully ready. Already able to channel the elusive state of flow. It was like he had it all already. An aura of imperturbability, a calmness and mental quietness. And right then I could see he was going to take surfing down an entirely new road. And scarily, I think he knew it too.
Such a great opener, and I love that. Every chapter, I sort of picked one passage as an intro that sort of set up the story. So that for me was one of the most powerful.
He had this like fire. You know, when you see an individual for the first time and someone that just has that sort of rare touch. And when I saw him surf, it was like his surfing was so fluid, and psychologists call it state of flow. I met the guy who developed the theory, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and it's the state of absolute optimal performance when you are so focused that you can bend time and space. And I thought that I could do it sometimes in my surfing, but it was like he could do it all the time. It was like his surfing was always sort of at that rarefied level. It was like he was flying at 30,000 feet and we were all flying at 10,000 feet. You know, it's amazing.
What I thought also was amazing, I learned a lot about surfing in doing this book. So it's 12 stories. You know, I couldn't have planned for there to be themes that happen, but somehow in the 12 stories there's an arc of sort of the history of surfing happens. And what I learned is, you know, this whole competition, you know, you guys do the first pro tour, really. You're the first, so it all becomes about competition, and then surfers like Tom Curran are like, I don't want that to be how I'm judged. I'm leaving that competition, you know. And they found like free surfing, it was you know, forget competition. And then what I found so interesting about Kelly and your story, which sort of made at the end, it brings it all full circle, because Kelly finds that creativity in competition. Yeah. He's able to put those two things together, which I found really fascinating.
Yeah, you know,
you captured that without me telling you.
Absolutely. You know, some people think, oh, you know, competition is limiting and competition is kind of not creative. But he cracked that paradigm. He smashed that paradigm. You know, his surfing, I've seen him surf. I was watching him surf in a final. I write about him there.
Yeah, which one is it? With Andy?
With Andy Irons.
Yeah.
So Andy Irons and him, this was the great rivalry of the 2000s. You know, Kelly was like the white knight and Andy was like the black knight. He unfortunately passed away a few years back, Andy Irons, but it was just an incredible rivalry, and they really, there was major antagonism between the two. And you know, they had their supporters, and Andy had his, and Kelly had his, and the game was on. It was on when they were in the water. So now they're in a final at a pivotal event in South Africa, in my homeland, at a place called Jeffreys Bay. And I'm sitting in the commentary booth. I was doing commentary with this legend, my great rival at the time, during my career, was Rabbit Bartholomew in Australia. And we were watching the final. and there's about 4 minutes to go. And it's right at the end of the day. They've been surfing through the day. There's been a big rip tide, so both founders are very, very tired. And Andy Irons gets this incredible wave all the way in, and the time's ticking down, and he hits the beach, and he runs up the beach, and he's got his arms above, he's got his board, and he's got his arms above his head. He's won the final. There's just like a couple minutes to go, and I'm standing there, and the crowd's cheering, and Kelly's just paddling out. And I look at Rabbit, and he looks at me, and we see there's a set approaching. And the time is ticking down, and there's like a minute left now. The set comes, and generally there's at least 2 waves in a set, but as a surfer you never really know. Sometimes there can be 6, sometimes there can be 2. You don't really know because you can't really see the next wave coming. So waves coming towards Kelly, and Rabbit and I going, well, let's see what he does on this wave. He paddles over it. And I said to Rabbit, I can't believe it. Another wave comes, he paddles over that wave too. I go to Rabbit, this is insane. And he swings around with 15 seconds to go and takes off and just gets this fantastic ride and wins it.
Amazing.
Like completely out of the blue. And I spoke to him a couple of days afterwards. And I said to him, we were just having, we were evening together, we were just having a drink. I said, hey, Kelly, what happened there? This is the level that he's operating. I'm saying that we at 10,000 feet, he's at 30,000 feet. He said, I was so tired, I was exhausted. And I was finished, I had nothing left, I had no gas left. And as I'm paddling out, 2 dolphins swam by me. He said, and I followed them, and they took me to where I needed to be.
I love it, and that story's in here.
I just went, what can I say?
It's sort of. Well, I think it's in one of the many tales told in the book about your stories and other stories, and I'm leaving it on that. See if anyone else has any questions they want to ask any of us, these guys.
Well, I started surfing at Malibu 70 years ago. 1955, when there were no surf movies and anything like that. But I went to Venice High School. There were 4 of us from Venice High that surfed, and you could buy a new balsa board. There was only one surfboard manufacturer, was Velzy Jacobs in Venice.
Yeah.
And you could buy a new balsa board then for $90 or $100, and good used ones for $40, which I did. And anyway, there were only 4 of us from Venice High that surfed. There were no movies or anything like that, but and you could park there. There's no parking down in Malibu, but it was great. And Gidget was surfing a couple years after that, who I met, and that was interesting to talk to her.
Yeah.
And anyway,
So who were the famous? Who were like the top guys at Malibu at that time?
pardon me?
Who were the top guys at Malibu at that time?
I don't think we had tough guys, but
No, top guys.
Yeah.
Top guys.
The
They're like
best.
the best guys.
Oh, well, Velzy Jacobs,
Yeah.
Dale Velzy
Dale
surfed
Velzy,
there. Yeah, and I can't remember the other ones, but they were named. They had big names. But it was wonderful back then. You could park. And, the balsa boards were, like I say, $100 new, $40 for used one, and they were like new. It was
Mickey
great.
Dora may have been.
I was going to ask what era was he? Was
Was he 50, 60?
60s,
Or 60?
Yeah, that's what I
So
thought.
anyway, it's a good time to surf, and we would come up to Rincon once in a while just for something different.
Wow.
But Malibu was great. I even surfed there at night in the moonlight.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
A couple
Awesome.
times. It was great.
You
Yeah.
still surfing?
Pardon me?
Are you still surfing?
Yeah, surfing at midnight.
You're surfing at midnight?
In the midnight.
Oh, no. Good for you.
Yeah, fantastic.
Good for
Thanks
you.
for sharing that. That's good.
What a story. Well, if anybody has any questions, yes.
I actually have a question for you. That since you're not a surfer, why did you decide this compilation of stories about surfers?
Well, it's fun. I see Dewey Nix in the background there, so he actually knows how I got into surfing. So I don't not surf. I'm just not these guys. I didn't grow up surfing. But I was at a magazine in the mid '90s called Condé Nast, which Michael Condé Nast Sports for Women, and my job there was the visual projects editor. And in looking for visual stories, I didn't find it in the world of softball and basketball and tennis. I mean, those were great stories, but the visual stories I found in the world of action sports, surfing, skateboarding, snowboarding, but surfing in particular for me because it had such a history. It's the one that had been around the longest. There were great personalities, great fashion, amazing photography, and I just really immersed myself in that. And it was around the same time that Roxy had launched. Quicksilver launched Roxy. I'm looking at Dewey back there because I'm going to talk about him in a second. And Roxy, the guy who ran Roxy's guy, Randy Hild, he really indoctrinated me into the whole world of surfing, and he actually hired Dewey Nix, who's back there, a fantastic photographer who I was working with at the time back in Condé Nast, to really take surfing, the culture, keep it authentic, but elevate it and just give it pop, and really is what brought that brand Roxy, made it so big. But Randy also brought me to Hawaii. He brought me to the North Shore. He introduced me to Rel Sun. He took me to the Eddie Cow contest. These were years that had me just immerse me in this world that I sucked up everything about it, because as a creative director, which was my background, that's what really drew me in. So I've just been fascinated by the sport, by its history. I actually had met this guy as a kid out in East Hampton. I was late 70s, and all my friends were the lifeguards, and they all had surfing man. So I looked at these magazines, and I was like, oh, there's that guy Shaun Tomson. Oh, I like what he's wearing. I like those Quicksilver or those short shorts and that. So it's like I totally was like Shaun Tomson. So as it turns out, you just mentioned Harry Minitree, this journalist. Well, they lived out in Amagansett, right around there. And Binky Minitree was one of the lifeguards and one of my good friends. And we heard Shaun Tomson's coming to East Hampton. I was like, what? And I will never forget that day. It's like, even I knew this. Like, oh my God, Shaun Tomson. But coming, and you tell the story of surfing at Georgia Beach, which I guess
fantastic day.
it was like they gave you some waves. The gods were like, we're gonna. So it's just really the history and the culture and the style and the photography that has drawn me to it. But what's interesting is I've always done photography books. I've never done a book of essays, of words. It's the first time I've done that, and they're incredible stories, and as I say, I didn't pick who did what, and every story is so different. Some are very personal. Some would I'll just quickly allude the Rel Sun story. If you know, Rel Sun is this pioneer in women's surfing, Hawaiian, who was as much a pioneer in women's health as surfing. And Rel was diagnosed in the 80s, with breast cancer. She was given a year to live, and outlived that diagnosis by 15 years. And in that time, went on to establish all these programs for breast cancer awareness, for women's health in Hawaii at a time when that was very taboo. And she was said, screw that. And really became as much a pioneer in that. And actually, Randy introduced me to her really late in her life at one of these contests that she put on, the Menehune contest for girls. And I remember meeting her and Randy saying, I want you to meet Rel Sun's Claudia Lebenthal. And I always talk about this. She gave me this hug, and in that hug, I felt such power, the warmth, the word aloha. I understood that word, aloha. sort of going off on a tangent for a question, what was it?
How'd you get into it? Why did you decide to write it?
No, after that, why did I go on my rails? Oh, sorry, but the personal story. So the woman who wanted to write about Rel, little did I know that she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. Little did I know that she was going to tell the story of Rel and her through her own diagnosis, still telling the story of Rel, but it's so personal. So there are these stories that surfing becomes a vehicle to talk about much bigger issues. Salema Masakala's story on Michael February, black surfer from South Africa, who blacks you'll talk about this, where it's blacks were not allowed in the water in South Africa during apartheid, and Salema himself, father's South African, who grew up surfing with pictures of white surfers on his wall, and along comes this kid, Michael February, black South African, on the Pro Tour, and for Salema, the fact that he exists, so he really tells the story of apartheid through his own. So but then there's Shaun's story about Kel. They're all so completely different. So I just found the stories fascinating.
So the stories are still universal, no matter what the
that's my long
vehicle
answer to
is.
that. Yeah.
One more question.
Go ahead.
Oh, sure. Question for both gentlemen. First, thank all three of you for coming and sharing. Asking from the perspective of a 55-year-old man, as you've grown through your 20s, 30s, 40s, into your 50s, how has your philosophy changed and adjusted with the passing years to still maintain a deep love and joy for surfing, in which you still suck the marrow from the bone versus let it drift into something from the past?
Interesting. I'll bet. So I was a surfing journalist, and I was dedicated surfer as a young man. But I'll bet this man right here has surfed 100 times more waves than I have. My feeling about surfing has not changed, though. It's in my heart. I feel a stoke when I see good conditions, good wave, a good swell. It never leaves you if you haven't ever been a diehard surfer.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. You just can't surf at that sort of cutting edge level. So you not like you lower your expectations, but I think you just become a little bit more realistic. And today, I mean, I don't have to go out there and get the best wave and be the best guy on the water. I just have to go out there and get a couple of good turns off. So, I mean, I still have that same passion, and I love to watch and watch the young guys and watch the progression. But like the life and death stuff, is not for me.
I used to watch Shaun in a heat, and he would get 5 waves that were better than any wave I'd ever surfed in my life in one heat. So that's what that was. I was telling Claudia last night. I said there was a time when I worked at Surfing Magazine, maybe 3 or 4 years. And someone asked me, what's the best thing about working at surfing? I said, I got a special pass on the trestles, and it was like it gave you there were certain benefits. They said, what's the worst thing about surfing? I said, the worst thing about working at surfing is the surfers. You have to understand, to really be a good surfer as a kid, and especially as a grown-up, you've got to be completely irresponsible, because you've got to be there. You got to be there surfing when the surf is good, and if you're there surfing when the surf is good, and you're supposed to be on the clock, that doesn't work that way.
Well, how did you finance all this? You sort of touched on
Well,
it.
he was at the beginning, the genesis of the real money in surfing. The Quicksilver board shorts, and the fashion and culture and professionalism. That he was one of the first professionals. Actually helped found the what was it then? The
It was
ISPA.
called the RPS, the International Professional Surfers. Yeah, we helped. So I'll tell you how big we were. I was the #1 surfer in the world in 1975. I got to Hawaii. I bought a car for $150. That's all I could afford. I drove it for 3 months. At the end of the season, I left it on the side of the road with the keys in it with a note on it, good luck.
I'll show you that car. We do happen to have that.
we had no money. I mean, you know, yeah, that's
my
the car.
favorite.
That's my car, my valiant push button. I left that car on the side of the road with a note, good luck, and the keys in it, right there on Cam Highway. And
It's
that's
so
like a little
good.
bit further down the road, I left it, right there. After I rode it for 3 months. It was a place.
And you sent me this picture. He kept sending me pictures that he just knew I'd be like, oh my god, oh my god.
But Shaun, what's your favorite picture of you surfing, and like who took it?
Oh, good question.
I've got two. One, I've got my wife took, or my son Luke is like on my back, and we're riding in on a wave together. So that one I love. And then this guy Steve Wilkins took a picture of me, and I'm riding, and I'm arching, and I'm smiling. You know, you don't often see surfers smile. Like when I used to come out of a tube, it used to make me smile. You know, guys will grab their crutch or whatever. But for me, it was like, oh, that sublime experience. But you know, I want to tell you something about surf stories, sort of from like a broader view. You know, our sport lifestyle started in Hawaii. And the Hawaiian culture is founded on, they call it talk story. And everything in Hawaiian culture wasn't a written language, it was handed down through stories, not dissimilar to the Shumash people here, you know, who've been living here for 13,500 years. It was also a story culture. And surfing stories are incredibly powerful to help people when they're suffering, to help people create personal transformation in their lives. You might ask, well, how do you know that? I've told surf stories to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, from the biggest corporations, schools, universities, rehab clinics, prisons, Santa Barbara County Jail I've been to a few times. So a month ago I was at Harvard, the Kennedy School of Leadership. I did 3 talks to the brightest minds in the world. These are all young people who are going to be running the world from every nation, young people. And right at the beginning of the presentation, I asked them, text me a word that describes how you're feeling. And I form a word cloud. What a word cloud is, it's an agglomeration of words with the more frequent words being larger. So at a glance, you can see how people are feeling about life. I call it mind state, the state of your mind. At a glance, you can see it. Stress, anxiety, these were the words of these young people. Stress, anxiety, depression, disconnection. I call it a sad mind state. It was, I couldn't believe it. But this is the power of surfing stories. I tell 3 surfing stories, just like the stories that are written in the book. I tell a story about courage and commitment. There's many stories about courage and commitment in here. I tell a story about perseverance and resilience. And I tell a story about interpersonal connectivity, about deep emotional connectivity. And then everyone does this little process. There's a little bookmark for all of you I'm going to give you. This is a surface code, but I get people to write their code, 12 lines, every line beginning with I will. 15-minute exercise. These people write their future. You know, and I do it. Well, last week I was at Morgan Stanley. I mean, huge corporations. But at Harvard, it was really interesting. Tell 3 surf stories. Everyone writes their code. Then I ask them, text me a word you're taking home with you. Okay. You got a start point, you got an end point. 100% positive. That's the power of surfing stories. Surfing stories have got incredible power. I remember when I was young, okay, not to say that surfing stories, well, kind of they are, you know, I'd read Homer, I'd read about Odysseus and his voyage and coming home. And those stories, man, they were just so amazing. Surfing stories, power. I see it and I know it. He's 12, yeah. Yeah, but I'm saying that you know, it's a book to entertain, but also It's a book to inspire and transform, because surfing stories have got power.
Absolutely. There's a bigger message in every single one of them, whether or not you serve. So.
Shaun, Claudia, Chris, thank you so much for
Thank
sharing.
you, everyone.